Alright, enough with the giggles. Let's get back to the serious stuff. Like a mind-controlling gorilla. Welcome to Binge Watchers, where we talk about the stories and characters we love and the shows they live in. My name is Ron, let's talk about The Flash. So The Flash would be the first comic book show I review, and the reason for that is that comic book shows have a lot of episodes, and if you don't watch them as they're coming out, you have a lot of catching up to do. Also, comic book shows tend to be freak of the week kind of shows, and while that can be a lot of fun, I'm not a huge fan of the formula. That's one of the reasons it's taking me so long to get through Arrow. The Flash, I must say, is different. So The Flash tells the story of Barry Allen as he becomes the Flash and starts fighting crime with the help of his Star Labs crime-fighting buddy. The show also follows Barry as he explores his powers and tries to figure out the truth behind his mom's murder. The Flash is very different from Arrow. One of the problems that I had with Arrow is that on the one hand, it's supposed to be dark and gritty and not realistic, but you know what I mean. And on the other hand, it's ridiculous because it's comics. The source material here is comics, and comics are awesome, but they're also weird. And I never found the balance between those two things in Arrow. Flash, however, fully embraces the weirdness of comic books, and it feels like watching a comic book. And because the show so fully embraces the silly, the over-the-top, it actually makes everything flow much better. It was easier for me to be actually moved by some of the stories here. Side by side, you have a freeze gun and villains with silly names, but also genuinely interesting relationships between some of these characters. Barry and Harrison, for example, the dynamic between those two was just done very well. There are a few things that were a bit much for me, like anything with Iris, for example. I felt that her character and her story was generic and kind of boring. The actress does a good job, but if I could bring myself to fast forward during shows I watch, which I can't, because it's a sin, but if I could, I would probably skip most of her scenes. I get why we need her there, I get why we need the love interest, but it's the most generic love interest ever. The Flash was a special show for me because the freak of the week aspect of it didn't bother me at all. Most of the episodes are very entertaining on their own. There are a few episodes that kind of repeat themselves because they're trying to figure out how to beat the villain, and then there's a point where someone is like, I got it, I figured it out. Run really fast. And then he's like, oh, okay, yeah, and then he runs really fast, and then he does the thing, and you know, but it's always fun enough to keep me interested and keep me watching, even if it doesn't keep me guessing. Most shows, even shows that do Freak of the Week really well, like Fringe, have the bulk of their episodes as standalone episodes that you can pretty much watch in any order. And then towards the end of the season, the overarching story becomes more apparent. In Flash, they did a really good job at putting a good amount of the overarching story into pretty much every episode. That, for me, was enough to keep me interested. And then about halfway through the season, towards the end, like episode 15 or 16, it just goes freaking crazy, and it's a fun ride and it's just done well. But all of the crazy is backed up by the story they've been telling you all season and not just over the last few episodes. And that, in my eyes, was awesome. Something you need to accept about this show, that if it bothers you, you will not get through a single episode, is that about 50%, if not more, of the dialogue in the show is this science gibberish where they could basically say anything and you'll go with it because none of it makes sense and it really doesn't matter. Sure, take this stick and the stick will suck the atoms out of the air, and then that guy can't control the weather because of science. Sure, whatever, I'm in. Go for it, do it. If that kind of thing bothers you even a little bit, you're not gonna have a good time with this show. In fact, you'll be rolling your eyes so hard you'll probably break your neck. So, safety first. I really like comics, but I'm not very familiar with the worlds that these stories take place in, and there's something I noticed about the show that I wanted to ask you guys about. So in DC Comics, do the stories generally take place on a version of our Earth? I get that they have Coast City, Central City, Starling City, Metropolis, Gotham, which are basically counterparts of existing American cities, but in this show they make a lot of pop culture references to TV shows and movies, all kinds of stuff. And I mean, I get why we need that, and it's a lot of fun, it's great, but I was wondering if the stories in the comics are the same. Do the comics basically take place in our world with our frames of reference? You know what I mean? Because I was under the impression that was sort of a Marvel thing. I hope that any of that made sense. Anyway, bottom line, should you watch it? Let's face it, if you're a comic book fan or you were a fan of Arrow, odds are you've already watched it. But still, I would say if you're looking for a fun ride and you're willing not to take things seriously and you don't have a problem with or even like crazy storylines that are also kind of crazy good, actually, then you're gonna have a good time with Flash. I know I did. I think it's one of the best shows of its kind. It knows what it is and it just does it well. So have you watched or are you watching Flash? Who was your favorite villain? Leave your answer to that or any other thought you might have had about the show in the comments down below and we'll get the discussion going. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps out a lot. And if you're finding Binge Watchers for the first time, welcome! I'd like to invite you to join the Binge Watchers community. We're talking about TV every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with opinions and reviews and news and sketches and all kinds of great stuff, all for you fellow Binge Watchers and TV lovers. So you can go ahead and click that big subscribe button to join in on the fun, or you can check out any of the other videos on the channel. In any case, keep binging, and I'll see you next time.